All right, guys, so today we are talking about due diligence when it comes to buying a home. Now, this isn't the most riveting topic, so we do have moral support. However, this is something you definitely need to know when it comes to purchasing a house because it's different here in the state of North Carolina compared to other states. So if you already know what due diligence is and you want to skip ahead to how it's different in North Carolina, you can go ahead and check the timestamps in the description. But we're first going to start off with what is due diligence. But first, let's take a little sip. Okay, think of due diligence as this. Whenever you submit an offer on a house as a buyer, there are typically two forms of deposits that you pay. Both of them go towards your down payment. There's your due diligence deposit and your earnest money deposit. Now, when it comes to your due diligence deposit, think of it this way. As soon as your offer is accepted by the sellers, you are writing them a due diligence check. You are giving it to them essentially the next day. They are going to cash it, and then that is their money to keep. While on our end, we do our due diligence from inspections, appraisals, things of that nature. So that's essentially what due diligence is. It's a deposit that you are giving to the seller as the buyer in order for them to take their house off the market while you go ahead and do your inspections and things of that nature. So how does it actually work whenever you submit an offer, and how do you know how much due diligence to put down? So essentially, let's say this is an example. I have buyers and we are deciding to put an offer in on a house. So how it works is whenever we're crafting up the offer and we're analyzing all the terms that we want to submit, due diligence is one of them. So in order to decide how much due diligence, there's a few factors that go into play. In North Carolina, a rough ballpark of due diligence can be anywhere from 1% to 10% of the purchase price. Now, how do you decide if you're putting in more towards the 1% or 10%? This depends on multiple factors, all of which it is our job as real estate advisors to help guide you through. But a few things that you have to think about are, number one, is it a competitive situation? So if you have multiple offers coming in, your due diligence deposit is something that you want to be compelling enough where a seller looks at it and says, okay, this person, this buyer is willing to give me a large enough due diligence deposit up front in addition to a compelling list price. So the other thing that helps us guide how much due diligence to put down is also looking through a property disclosure and seeing what items might come up in an inspection. For an example, if you have a home that's only like 1 or 2 years old and it's really well been taken care of, you're probably not worried about something major coming up on an inspection. Therefore, you're more likely to probably put down a larger due diligence to show the seller that you're really invested. However, let's say it's an older home and we're reading through the property disclosures and we see that the seller has marked no representation on everything, meaning they're not disclosing ahead of time anything about the home. That might be a situation where we say, okay, let's lean back and put in a little less on due diligence, because if we get an inspection and something comes back that's a real issue, we don't want your due diligence money to get lost. So on that note, how does due diligence differ in North Carolina than any other state? So North Carolina is considered a non-contingent state. And what this means is regardless of the reason, if you decide to walk away from a property that you've put an offer and therefore due diligence on, you do not get that due diligence money back. Meaning, regardless of what comes up on the inspection, if you decide to walk away, that due diligence is non-refundable and it's the seller's to keep. Alternatively, let's say you are under contract on your current home and you're looking to purchase your next home, and we submit what's called a contingent offer, meaning in order for you to purchase this next home, your current home has to be sold. If for whatever reason that sale of your current home falls through, you do not get your due diligence back since North Carolina is a non-contingent state. Now, I know that can initially sound very scary and overwhelming. However, here's the good news. So the good news is, though, I have never had a buyer lose due diligence, and it's not super common here for buyers to lose due diligence, and here's why. Number one, your agent should be walking you through prior to submitting an offer what your expectations should be regarding due diligence. So if we have clients that really, really want a home and it's a multiple offer situation and they say, hey, I'm willing to put down, let's say, $15,000 in due diligence. Our question to them would be, okay, just to set expectations, if something comes back on the inspection report that cost $10,000, let's say, again, more of like a worst case scenario situation or something along those lines, do you still want to move forward with this house? And if the answer is yes, then something like a larger due diligence for them to secure the house makes a lot of sense. But alternatively, if the answer is like, I just don't know if this house would still be worth it to us, then it's a conversation of, okay, maybe then we need to adjust due diligence if that's something we think could be a possibility. So these are all things that your agent ahead of time should be talking through with you in order to navigate what amount of due diligence makes the most sense given that current house and like the multiple offers, the property disclosure, but on top of that, how much you personally want the house and what the house is worth to you. So the other thing I want to mention is something you have to keep in mind is if something comes back large enough on an inspection where, like, let's say it's a big red flag and you're thinking from a buyer like, oh my gosh, what if the seller does not want to pay to get it fixed? Because again, in North Carolina, we're a non-contingent state. A seller is not required to fix anything once they go under contract. However, most sellers, it's going to be in their best interest if something large enough comes back on an inspection report, more than just like your general wear and tear and something that's of more substantial concern. A seller either has two options. They can choose to negotiate with us and compromise, and hopefully it's a situation of they're willing to pay for or at least contribute to fix the problem. However, let's say worst case scenario, a seller is like, nope, I am not paying to fix anything. And you as a buyer say, you know what, this house actually isn't worth it to me. I'm willing to walk away from my due diligence. So then the seller has two options. They can either, one, go ahead and relist the home, and then now they have to disclose that large issue that came up because now it's a material fact, so something that has to be disclosed. Or the other option is they go ahead and fix the issue themselves and then relist it. So I always look at it this way, and a lot of, if you're a listing agent on the listing agent side, you're going to communicate this with your seller as well. Hey, we have two options here. These buyers could walk away, they might not, but if we choose not to compromise with them and they do walk away, then we're left in the position as a seller that we have to then go through the process of relisting. We have to then disclose the issues, or we get it fixed, but we still have to relist. And then there's the inevitable question of, why did this house fall out of contract? So typically when it comes to buyers, when you're putting down that due diligence, it sounds scary that it's non-refundable, but as you can see, there's a lot of things that we have to go through in order to get to a situation where it makes sense for a buyer to completely walk away and for a seller not to be willing to help contribute towards any of the repairs. Okay, so just to quickly recap, due diligence is the initial deposit that you as a buyer give to the seller in order for them to take their home off the market so you can do your inspections, get your appraisal done, things of that nature. If at any point during your due diligence period, you decide to walk away from the home for whatever reason, you have that option, but you do not receive back your due diligence. Or alternatively, if something comes back up on an inspection or there's an issue with an appraisal, which if you're doing your research as an agent ahead of time, there really shouldn't be, then it's one of those situations where your buyer's agent will go to the listing agent and do their best to negotiate and come to some sort of compromise so everyone can walk away happy. But as a reminder, the main thing that makes North Carolina different when it comes to due diligence than other states is that your due diligence is non-refundable. But as we've chatted about today, it's really not as scary as you probably think. So if you guys have any questions on this, feel free to reach out. I know that when you're moving from state to state, or even within the state of North Carolina, or from one side of Raleigh to the other, things when it comes to buying a home can change over the years and feel overwhelming. So always here to chat. Cheers.